It's not often you get a mea culpa from me, but I actually think I might have made a bit of a mistake. What happened was this. I watched the Netflix series Adolescence and I loved it. And I got very irritated when, after having watched it, just simply thought it was a good drama. I didn't go over the top. I thought it was very interesting, gave me lots to think about, very well acted, reasonably well conceived, well filmed and so on. I got into a complete tiz that it was being condemned by so many people who hadn't seen it. There was all sorts of accusations made. Why was the main character in it white, the young boy? Why was he white when it was about a knife crime? And the implication was all the knife crime is committed by young black men, and therefore we shouldn't have a white central character. People were treating it as though it was in some way a documentary that was distorting the reality of who the culprits are in society. And I really reacted against that. And I went on the Spiked podcast and sang the praises of Adolescence to high heaven and went on and on about why everyone should watch it. Move forward a few weeks, and now if I hear anyone praising Adolescence, I want to punch them out. It's driving me mad, because what has happened is something different has occurred, which is that Adolescence has joined the political debate and has been adopted by the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, and the Labour government as somehow the most important programme that's ever been made, that shows everyone great insight into the radicalisation of young, would you believe it, boys in particular, but young white boys as well. They've made that point. And it's ridiculous, because we now have a situation where there was a summit called by Number 10, a summit no less, with everything else that we're facing, to discuss how this Netflix series could be used as an educational tool. And the agreement is that it should be freely streamed in every school in the country and be used as an educational device. And at this summit, a number of things were revealed. First of all, the summit was attended by a charity called Tender. Tender works with young people. Its particular emphasis is on the problems of young males being radicalised around incel culture. More of that in a moment. And we've discovered that they have actually received huge government funding. And they advised on the film, which nobody had noted before. So suddenly it goes from being a fictional, made-up story to potentially, actually, what the people were saying was more propagandizing than I'd maybe imagined. But also at this summit, we had the NSPCC and a range of other children's charities all sitting down round. And instead of accepting that it's fictional, a made-up story, they were treating it as though, in fact, it was the epitome of what's actually happening to young people. The fictional series, which I liked, is now being treated as an excuse for saying that we're going to have to ban mobile phones in schools by one group of people. I think the Tories have gone down that line. Other people saying that we've got to do something about censoring online access to young people, regardless, that's the government, enhancing the Online Safety Act, and so on and so forth. In other words, we've got into a situation where my defence of this work of fiction has been completely confused, as though, in fact, it's now going to be the insight that everybody needs to watch it, or they will not understand contemporary society, which is ridiculous. We've got to a situation where Kemi Badenoch admitted that she hadn't seen it on LBC, and she's been treated as though she's completely lost the plot, and that this is the greatest irresponsible act by a politician ever. How can she possibly be in a situation where she hasn't watched it? Now, I would like to say, if I was in the Kemi Badenoch team, I would have said, watch Adolescence, Kemi, because everyone's talking about it. If you want finger on the pulse, it might be worth it. But on the other hand, if she hasn't watched it, I do not want to condemn her politically, because that's entirely up to her. We now found out that half the cabinet have not watched it. So this is like the right think it's hilarious to have discovered this, and now they're going to try and bash the cabinet for not having watched it. But there is something telling about the fact that so many people are pronouncing on it who haven't seen it. The other thing is that on 2 or 3 occasions now, Keir Starmer has called it a documentary. It is not a documentary. He's then creating a documentary, film. In other words, they are treating it like a documentary. I'd just like to say, should this series be shown in schools? A few observations, not particularly original, but I want to make them. The first one is that this is a series that helps old fogies like me and adults and lots of parents potentially have a bit of an insight as to what 13-year-olds everywhere are going through in terms of their access to Insta, social media of all sorts, some of the influences, to the point where at one point the son of the detective has to explain to his father what the emojis mean on Instagram in order to explain what is going on in relationship to the tensions that this young 13-year-old boy is experiencing at school. So actually, it would be ridiculous that a series that's been made for adults to understand what young people are going, is now going to be shown to young people so that they can see for themselves what they already know for a start off. So that makes no sense. Secondly, in episode 2, we have a completely dysfunctional school in which many of the teachers are absolutely out of control, useless. There's complete chaos in the school. The idea that you would show that in a school where you would effectively be setting up any educational establishment as unable to cope with the modern world would seem to me to be foolish, to say the least, and not worth doing. Thirdly, in episode 3, we have a psychotherapist. It's a brilliant episode, by the way. But the psychotherapist keeps hassling the young 13-year-old about whether masculinity is the crisis that has led him to act in a particular way, in a particularly violent way. And the young lad himself actually mocks the psychotherapist. It's actually, in that sense, it's quite a subtle, in some ways, drama. It's an imaginative piece of work. And there's different layers. It isn't just bang, bang, bang propaganda. But nonetheless, you get this exchange between the psychotherapist and the young boy. And there's some very uncomfortable bits because the psychotherapist keeps asking this 13-year-old about sex and his sexual feelings and so on. I'd just like to point out that that's uncomfortable for all sorts of reasons. But the one thing that I would say is that 13-year-olds are not meant to be having sex. I'm not making any comment as to whether they are having sex. I'm just making the point they're not meant to. What you're not meant to do is to show in a school setting an adult pestering a 13-year-old about his sexual feelings, because this seems to me to be a completely intrusive and inappropriate thing to do. And one of the themes of the whole series is that this young boy feels as though he's been treated as an incel. Google it if you don't know. Incel, because the older girl mocks him for his sexual inexperience and his sexual unattractiveness. And he therefore feels completely, inadequate and leads to all sorts of horrors, right? Whether that would ever happen in real life, I'm just saying. But the thing that I would say is, do you really want that to be like on the curriculum for all kids to discover? It's one thing to be talking over the dinner table or parents to show it or watch it with their kids and have the conversation. But I think it seems to me to be irresponsible, at the very least. This is being rolled out in schools and just shows you that this is a government that can't possibly be serious if they think that this is going to be a solution to anything. If you want to show films in school, and other people have made this point, why don't you show, I don't know, the docudrama 3 Girls about the rape gangs that were happening all over the northwest of England and which people ignored? Now, I'm not advocating that. What I'm saying is you can understand why people start to get saying, well, why don't you show this one? Why don't you show that one? Why choose this particular series? It's an absolute nonsense. So what I want to say is art should be judged as art. The makers of this film are much better artists than they are politicians. I'm not interested in what Jack Thorne thinks about politics. I am interested in the fact that he's made a great piece of art, and we should leave it at that. They should not be intertwined in this way. And a government should never, ever, ever make policy based on watching something on Netflix. It is a ridiculously superficial thing to do. And the fact that somebody mentions the Tate brothers in a fictional drama does not mean that every single act of violence by a teenager in this country is created by people having access to the Tate material. It is a irresponsible and superficial way of dealing with an issue. But I also have to say that I also reacted in a knee-jerk way when I actually said it was the most brilliant drama ever known to man, as a way of bending the stick against those who were damning it before they'd seen it. So somewhere along the middle, we should watch these things, chat about them, and keep them well away from the political arena.